from Heller and CTS introduce themselves? Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for joining this session. I see Stephanie started the recording. So I'll invite the Heller team to introduce themselves and then CCS, and then we can get started.
Yeah, thank you everyone so much for having us today. I know you could be checking emails and so after the holiday break, so I'm glad that you're joining us. My name is Jett Winders. I'm the Director of Business Development at Heller Consulting. And prior to my role at Heller Consulting, I spent 8 years at a digital marketing agency using a lot of the tools we'll be talking about today and executing some of the campaign strategies that Cathy and perhaps Andy will be sharing with us as well. Andy or Cathy, did you want to introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'll go ahead. So my name is Catherine Moore. I'm a senior strategist with Heller Consulting. I really lead our digital practice and do a lot of work with our change management and CRM practices as well. I've been with Heller Consulting for about 4 years, and before that I worked in technology, fundraising, and marketing in the nonprofit sector for about 20 plus years. Andy?
Hi, everybody. I'm Andy Caswell. I'm the National CRM Implementation Lead for the Canadian Cancer Society. So my role over the last 3 years has been to implement Salesforce for the whole organization and replace 13 legacy systems that included Razor's Edge, a Salesforce instance, a Dynamics instance, and some volunteer software as well. And so my role was the implementation of that, and it included marketing automation. That's our phase 2, and we're just about to begin that.
Yeah, and is there anything else we need to do at the top of the call, or should we just dive on in?
Let's dive on in. Thanks for the introductions, everyone.
I appreciate it. I'll give just the quick 1-minute version of where Cathy and I come from, Heller Consulting. We're an agency that spent about 25 years helping nonprofits use technology to, further their missions and their fundraising goals. We have the privilege of working with a lot of amazing organizations. We only work with nonprofits, and so we're in a unique position to see what's working and what's not working in the sector, and make a lot of that expertise available to folks. And that's why we're really excited to be here today. We've had the chance to work with a lot of amazing organizations and tackle some really challenging use cases. And then we bring that expertise to clients of all sizes that we work with across the country and US and Canada and beyond. And one of those amazing clients is Canadian Cancer Society. I know we had the chance to do introductions at the very top of the call, but I'm really pleased to have Andy from Canadian Cancer Society with us. As he shared, he's fresh off a major implementation that with his organization that of which marketing automation was a major consideration, and has a great long-standing working relationship with our senior strategist, Cathy Moore, who leads our digital practice here at Heller Consulting. And again, I'm Jett Winders. So I'll keep plowing through, but we're going to hear a lot more from Andy and Cathy later in the presentation. But what I was going to do is provide just a little bit of an overview of what the technology landscape looks like and how we can start to think about digital marketing automation tools in the context of the CRM systems that they live within, and what the options are out there, and how do we start to categorize them. And then we'll turn it over to Cathy and Andy to really start looking at how do you evaluate these tools against organizational priorities and ability to use them successfully, and the strategies that need to be in place for them to make a difference. And then we'll hear some really practical advice on how to take action with those tools, some success stories, what's worked, perhaps maybe what isn't working as well, and what you might want to avoid. So hopefully leave you with some really practical advice there. So I'll start out with just an overview of what Heller Consulting thinks of as the big three technology providers. And the reason we start here is that with Salesforce, Blackbaud, and Microsoft really being the largest providers of nonprofit technology, we really want to start with what they are thinking, what they are doing, because when they take action or make an investment or release a new product, it really affects the larger ecosystem. So many other companies, when one of these three players makes a move, they're creating technology in response to it, they're making integrations in response to it, and so many of the systems that we use, our data is living on these systems. These are already in place at our organization. But another way to look at those big three providers is not just, saying everything's equal, is to look at them slightly differently. And so this slide shows these same providers by their revenue size. And we can see that really changes the perspective a little bit with Blackbaud. Yes, Blackbaud is the largest provider of technology to nonprofits, in that they only provide technology to nonprofits. But when we look at an organization like Salesforce at more than 10 times the revenue size of Blackbaud, they're obviously reaching a much broader market and industry as well as nonprofits, but that also provides them with a lot more investment in research and development. They're investing more in security, and those are things that they're able to bring to bear on their roadmaps for nonprofits. And then the same is true for Microsoft at yet a factor of 10 beyond Salesforce. So when they move forward with a new initiative, like their Technology for Social Impact program, or when they release a discount for products to nonprofits, it really forces everybody to respond and look at their technology in light of what these organizations are doing. And one of the trends that Heller Consulting has seen lately is a shift away from looking at a tool as a single tool is going to solve all of our problems, and success looks like finding one tool that checks off all of the functionality boxes. That is an older way of thinking about the type of solution that we might look for, whether it's our CRM or our marketing automation. In our guide that we released earlier this year called Survival of the Nimblest, we really make this point that, nowadays what we're looking for is solutions that are going to meet our needs, but that ultimately work well together to provide us the information that we need, to use data effectively, and some other things like business intelligence solutions, being able to tie data from disparate systems, has really allowed us to look at these best in breed point solutions that provide really powerful, specific functionality, such as marketing automation, that allow us to do things we couldn't do before with sort of catch-all tools that tried to do a lot of things. We can see this effect really vividly if we look at digital fundraising tools specifically. When I really love this guide from Firefly Partners, that they put together this chart talking about some of the digital tools that are out there in the market, and we can really see that they're classifying them as email marketing, fundraising, peer-to-peer, event fundraising, and advocacy. And so a tool like Luminate Online, which has been in the space for a really, really long time, and probably many of the folks on this call are using, their value proposition is that they provide functionality in all of these categories, and that they can do a lot of different things, whereas a different tool like Pardot isn't trying to make that promise broadly. They're offering a very specific set of functionality that goes very, very deep in email marketing and marketing automation. And so it's not really an apples and apples comparison in this case, because if you are choosing a tool like Pardot to do your email marketing automation, you're really committing to an ecosystem of tools that would handle your total digital footprint. As in contrast to a tool like Luminate Online, which might not go as deep in some areas, but is offering a broad set of functionality. We released a guide called the Formula for Nonprofit Marketing Automation Success that also tries to drive this point home, where these new tools, yes, they offer really, really powerful automation functionality, and we really need to tie that into those big three providers or whatever CRM provider you're using, that it's with that data from those systems that connected will drive your success in marketing automation. And we'll hear a little bit later too that it's not the technology alone, it's also the constituent strategy that you'll need in place so that you can ultimately make a really strong impact. So what are the actual tools available to us? I'll stick with our big three theme to look at what those providers are offering to the marketplace. We have Blackbaud's Luminate Online, Salesforce with Pardot and Marketing Cloud, and then Microsoft with Dynamics 365 Marketing. And it's important to kind of know, what those providers are putting out into the universe, because when you're talking to those folks, they'll certainly say that their solution is the one that you should buy as part of what you're buying with them. And in some cases, there is a real benefit, with Pardot, for example, with Salesforce, it being built really part and parcel with Salesforce, has deep integration and works really well together. So there can be some, true value to what they're sharing. But in some other cases, we're really talking about a level of integration which may be strong, but other tools may integrate very well with these platforms as well. And so you'll want to evaluate the functionality available in these tools against what's available in the broader marketplace, knowing that as long as the data integration is there, you can be successful. But boy, are there a lot of tools. And I could have easily created a slide that had double this number of marketing tools out there. And so I wanted to share just a couple of ways to start thinking about those tools before we get into a more detailed way of really evaluating them. And that's first that I've highlighted what the big three are offering. So you'll still see Illuminate, Pardot, Marketing Cloud, and Dynamics 365 on here. But this is just our this is our Heller pass at how to evaluate the depth of functionality on these tools. But they're not all equal in terms of how deep the functionality is being offered. And so we've put them on a scale from what we might think of as basic email marketing to, going up the scale to a fully fledged marketing platform that is going to help you across channels and do a lot of complex campaign strategies. And so, you'll be wanting to look at these tools and match your needs against what the tool has to offer, but don't forget that how it works together in your greater ecosystem is going to be critical to being successful to whatever tool you ultimately choose. So with that, I'll hand it over to Cathy to start talking a bit about how to start thinking about marketing automation functionality in contrast to how we might have thought about it before, and look at ways of evaluating these tools in context of what you might need at your organization.
Thanks, Jett. You can see on the slide here, it says email marketing is not equal to marketing automation. And this is a transition that a lot of nonprofits are in the process of making and trying to understand how to get there. I think of email marketing as the traditional, sending an email blast or a mass email to a large list of people. And then that transition to marketing automation, which gets into sending emails automatically at scale, we hear a lot of, which really implies starting to learn more about the person, being able to automate the sending of those emails based on what you know about that person, and getting much more targeted and segmented in terms of the emails that you're sending, which allows you to do some of those more advanced features like identifying potential fundraising leads and nurturing them and scoring them and assigning them to a major gifts officer. So really addressing the mass, but in a highly personalized way, and still being able to funnel up those people who are going to rise up that donor pyramid. Jett, let's go to the next slide. Thanks. If we come back to those three options that Jett highlighted, we've got the basic email marketing tools that really let you set up emails fairly quickly, They manage a global opt-in and opt-out, but for a long time, nonprofits were not required to be compliant with legislation around privacy, or were able to get away with it. And now things are much tighter around that particular area, so that's a much bigger consideration. And really, you would be sending email to lists, large lists of people, as I mentioned earlier. Marketing automation, we want to start doing that automated sending. We're looking at email series, welcome series for both donors and people who are leveraging our mission, our services. And then when we really get into these marketing platforms, we're looking at a bigger tool, a solution that really allows us to manage, we hear this a lot these days, our customer or constituent experience. So we're designing an experience across channels and across applications. So there's a real need to have a tightly integrated CRM. You're looking at multi-channel campaign management. You're looking to understand your attribution of gifts across different channels and platforms, highly coordinated messaging, very, very much one-to-one marketing. So I know as much as I can about you, and I'm targeting any of my messages, whether it's by email, by SMS, social media, all of those different channels, targeting at you very specifically based on what I know. And those marketing platforms also do some of the things that we think about as asset management. We want to manage our creative assets across channels. We have a repository of those content, of that content. And then they also let us do that deep, deep analytical information. We don't see a whole lot of nonprofits who are at this stage yet, but there are tools out there that, for example, that Jett highlighted, like Salesforce Marketing Cloud, that really are intended to allow you to do that type of work. The marketing automation is really sort of that sweet spot where we see a lot of nonprofits wanting to move. We're getting into more segmentation, really getting into personalization, and allowing people to select what they want to hear from us and then targeting that information based on that. You can go to the next slide, Jett. And we'll start talking about some of the key foundational pieces that are necessary to really do that marketing automation. And you'll see that we have clean data and comprehensive data as the base of this foundational piece. And it's really easy to forget about the importance of clean data. But when you start marketing automatically without human intervention and at scale, it really exposes your data deficiencies. So a great way to think about this is I'm going to send an email series that's going to include information about your last gift, when you made it, and what the gift amount was, and perhaps how that reflects where you are in our level of donors. And you've created a recent online gift that does not reflect the fact that you've been a donor for 25 years because it's created a duplicate inside your system, and it's not connected to your donor history. And so what happens is a donor can receive an email with really inaccurate information that does not truly reflect who they are to your organization. They might also be a volunteer. They might be somebody who's benefiting from your mission, and that is not reflected because you haven't been able to keep your data highly comprehensive, get that 360-degree view of your constituent, and keep that data clean. Those inaccuracies are easier to hide when you're doing the first level, the basic email marketing, because you're not personalizing that information. The minute you start trying to do this at scale with highly personalized information, data becomes the foundation. Andy, do you want to share a little bit about the other three areas of the foundation here?
Sure. So where we were 3 years ago was that we were starting to aspire to something along the lines of marketing automation. But even before that, we wanted to be able to segment. Our organization is one of many that really has been taking the spray and pray approach to email marketing, which is gather as many email addresses that are valid and that allow you to send email. Gather as many as possible and send out as many emails as you can, as often as you can, without turning people off. we aspired to move beyond that. And the clean and comprehensive data on the foundation on the slide right now is really where we were at when we were trying to move to a single CRM. So at least we were pulling our data into one place so that we could start to do things like segmentation. And as Cathy said, moving to a meaningful communication path, you can't get there unless you have one record for a single person, and instead of, in our case, potentially 13 or 14 of them, depending on which databases we were working with. So we're at this really interesting spot right now where, for the very first time, we're seeing data from all of our legacy systems relating to donors and volunteers. We ended up with something like 18.5 million constituent records, and we're now just starting to dig in to see how many of those are actually duplicates.
Thanks, Andy. It's really easy when you're looking at budgets and thinking about the cost of different things to deprioritize the need to have someone who's responsible, or a group of people who are responsible for the quality of your data. But as I mentioned, the minute you start trying to move into this world of marketing automation, those inaccuracies surface very quickly at that constituent level. So you start to see the benefits of investing in clean data. Jett, let's move forward. Great. So that sort of leads us into conversations about whether or not the organization is ready to move to marketing automation and then move up that more sophisticated channel to integrated campaign management, cross-channel marketing, so on and so forth. So the first bullet we've got here on the slide is about strategic alignment. Is your organization ready to make the shift from mass marketing to a more personalized journey or automated engagement approach? Andy mentioned the spray and pray. Are you ready to look at constituent experience? Do you understand your constituents? And is the organization ready for that culture shift that really relies on everybody using the same data? It can involve some organizational change around breaking down silos and department barriers, and really shifting in the direction of a shared calendar and shared budget. Andy, I think you have some experience with that organizational change over the last few years as you've been working through this. Would you like to share a little bit of that?
Sure. Jett, actually, still on the previous slide, but yeah, one of the things that we went through was that, as I mentioned, we aspired to move beyond where we're at with that spray and pray approach. And one of the interesting things that we found as we were going through the RFP just to get to a single CRM was that when we had demos from the various platform vendors, they were very, very sexy. We had leaders from across our organization who were there to see the basic platform. So in our case, we looked at Blackbaud offerings, Microsoft and Salesforce. Salesforce brought Marketing Cloud and showed the idea of journeys. And as I said, we were aspiring to move in that general direction, but wow, that demo of Marketing Cloud really sold us. And we ended up adding that to our purchase from Salesforce 3 years ago. And it's there's a risk there. You develop that aspiration, and then people get so excited they're ready to move, and the logical, maybe slightly illogical thinking there is we need to get the tool right away, and that's what we did. And now 3 years later, we've just launched our CRM. We're just getting our data clean, and now we're finding, and you'll see in a little bit, that we need to stop and take a breath and look again at where we need to move based on where the organization is now. So Jett, if you want to move to the next slide. So one of the things that we realized was we needed a framework for development. Now that we're on a single CRM and we're starting to get our data in order, we realized that when we're looking at things, when we're re-looking at things like marketing automation, and other development as well. It could be in mission or other types of fundraising tools. We needed a set of guidelines to work with. And what you're seeing on the screen right now is actually a very first draft. This hasn't actually gone to our executive leadership team. It's had a first vetting by our vice president and our executive vice president, but there's discussion that needs to be had around this. But you can see we're starting to look a little bit beyond a single area. We had guiding principles for putting our CRM in place. This is going a little beyond that and looking more agnostically. And we thought it was really important to get these things down and ensure that we have some organizational buy-in. So the idea that Salesforce, that is our CRM now, is the platform of record, we thought it was really important that everyone in the organization understand that. So it is our single source of truth, and that truth is getting a little more truthier as time goes by. The second point there, consolidation is a priority, and Jett talked about the ecosystem. For us, there's a bit of a push and pull there between ecosystem and single platform. I think what we're aiming for is as simple an ecosystem as possible, and if we can consolidate without giving up functionality, we'll do that. The third point there, the Canadian Cancer Society is a nationwide organization in Canada, and in Canada there are two official languages, French and English. So it's really important to us that we look at the experience for users in Quebec. That's primarily where our French language users are, and the rest of Canada. There's a section here on ownership of data. And again, this is one of these areas where we think it's really important that we have organization-wide buy-in. Some of this looks really, so simple, the idea of data being owned at the organizational level. But if you look at where we come from in the past, where we had mission teams, and we had fundraising teams, and we had volunteer teams, and they jealously guarded their data, it's actually a big thing for us to move to this idea that ownership is held at the organization level. And then, following on that, you can see leveraging it across departments, while still ensuring that the business leads are responsible for the data quality that their departments are producing. And then we have an overall steward in the data analytics and solutions department. The technical selection and development area, you can see we've set some criteria there when we're actually selecting and developing. And some of these things are relatively new post-COVID-19. So for example, sustainability is key. When we look at tools now, or when we stop and relook at tools for marketing automation, we're looking at what does it take to support that tool, both in terms of technology support, but also within the business areas themselves. Our organization is much leaner now in September than it was in February. We're a substantially smaller organization, and we need to be able to look at things going forward. Can we actually support some of these fairly complex tools? The idea of a single organization-wide data schema is another piece there, and it sort of leverages the first point of Salesforce being the platform of record. Our idea is, even in an ecosystem, we're going to expect that any other systems or platforms that we use will conform to our new organization-wide schema, which is based on Salesforce. And I think the last two, alignment and privacy, are fairly straightforward. CCS has new priorities post-COVID-19. And of course, privacy, and we've seen in the news in the last few weeks, some of the issues around privacy. So that becomes one of the criteria that we're actually using to look at platforms.
Thanks, Andy. As I mentioned earlier, that privacy piece is continually evolving within the nonprofit sector, but it also does tie into that. I think the term Andy used is jealously guarded data silos. This is a really common issue with nonprofits, and the idea that these are my people and you can't communicate with them, versus that other, tendency to, I want to email everybody about everything. This is that conversation about organizational readiness and breaking down those silos and really transitioning to organization-wide data that is critical to being successful with these tools. So we've talked a little bit about organizational readiness, and let's pivot now to how you actually evaluate some of these tools. The marketplace has gotten a lot more complex. As Jett mentioned, there are levels of tools with different functionality, and then there are different ecosystems, and how does it all fit together? A few years ago, when people would come to us to help them select a tool, really we focused on the user experience over on the right-hand side. And we would work with our clients to develop a list of requirements, often driven by what people didn't like about their current system. And then we would go through a series of vendor demonstrations and have the vendors illustrate those different features in, perhaps guided scenario demonstrations. And then the users who were involved in the solution selection would rate those different platforms or solutions based on how they liked the experience that they were going through. And as the ecosystem of marketing solutions has become more complex, really doing that type of selection isn't working anymore, because we all have preferences about how we like to do things. We all have different levels of experience with these things. But now when we're talking about moving into a best of breed, into an ecosystem that includes your CRM, you really have a lot of other factors to look at in terms of consideration. So that user experience is really just one piece of the evaluation that we do at Heller when we're working with our clients to select the solution. For example, we look at the implementation approach. Does that implementation approach work with how your organization is implementing a tool? Is the vendor willing to be flexible about how they'll implement that? If you're an agile shop, will they work in an agile methodology? Andy mentioned the need for the solution to be sustainable. These newer tools are much more complex and require a lot of learning by your staff, and that not just initially to onboard on the platform, but to keep up with the changes these platforms are having over time. And so what type of staff do you have in your organization? What type of perhaps third-party or external staffing networks support do you have to maintain these tools over time? And then that doesn't even get into integration approach and the compliance and security pieces that come with these tools that are so critical. Andy, do you want to talk a little bit about the CCS experience as you've been thinking through these tools?
Sure. So like Cathy said, the user experience was primary for us. Go back 3 years when we had the demo, people were amazed at what could be done, and it looked amazing. The idea of pulling journeys together using one particular tool, in our case that was Marketing Cloud. What we found, particularly COVID-19 has really focused our thoughts. But what we've really found is we need to be a lot more systematic about things. And a few other things that we've realized is the staffing considerations in the upper left. It's possible that in order to support true marketing automation, we need to completely rebuild our organizational structure, our internal organizational structure. Department boundaries between the technical teams and the marketing teams, and in our case, the digital or public-facing email distribution and website teams, those boundaries start to really blur. And even as we look at who is going to lead the implementation, we need to look at things like, what are the roles of those different departments? Who should be leading this? All of that also touches again on the cost considerations. In the past, again, going back 3 years, I think we would have said marketing automation is a priority. We'll find the resources to make this happen. now, post COVID-19 world, where we've lost, in the neighborhood of 40% of our revenue in the space of a few months. When you look at cost, you have to look at it in terms of what are the trade-offs. If we invest fully enough to really go somewhere with marketing automation, what are we giving up on the other side? And is it worth it? I think it is in our case, but figuring out what those trade-offs are going to be a really interesting exercise.
Thanks, Andy. All of that said, you still want to include your users in the selection process because that's critical to adoption. And so our users are also the people who are going to help us understand what those key requirements are. We tend to try and get our users to prioritize their requirements or their needs. We use this, the short acronym, I guess, is MOSCOW: must, should, could, and will not. And really what we find is when you first lay out your requirements, you can do them in user stories, you can do them in technical specifications. There's different ways to do requirements or document your needs. But everybody typically initial pass rates everything as must have, or yes, I have to have that. So this scale is a scale that we try to use to really help people understand what is critical in their marketing automation tool versus what might be something that we're going to leverage later on, and really what matters little. Because what we see happen is we get those demos, the Marketing Cloud demos, the Adobe Marketing Cloud or Microsoft, and everybody falls in love with the aspirational vision that's down the road. And so all of a sudden everything is a must. But when we come back, we pull back, we look at those other considerations. Most organizations don't have the ability to, within the first 6 months or even 3 years, get to that aspirational point. So what is the best way for you to do that over the life cycle of your product and really look at the value of that product over time? We find that using a scale like this really helps in that assessment. So we've talked a little bit about organizational culture. We've talked about requirements and evaluating tools. It sounds daunting, and it's easy to get a little bit overwhelmed by that, but I don't want to shy away from talking about the success stories of these tools. I have worked for the last 3 years or 4 years with this client, Hillel International. They are the world's largest Jewish campus organization. They recruit, they engage with students at the high school level and then moving through university and then onward in their lifetime. So their whole goal is to develop a lifetime relationship with people centered around a campus. And they had a lot of data. They felt like their data showed they should be raising more money in their digital fundraising, but they were really emailing everybody on their list about everything. And so they came to us and they said, can you help us leverage this tool that we bought, quite frankly, with that vision of we can do these one-to-one journeys, highly personalized marketing, but we haven't been able to get there. So how can we use Marketing Cloud more strategically and move forward? Next slide, Jett. Thanks. One of the first things that we did with this client is we looked at their email deliverability. And we were finding that they were getting some complaints, which meant their deliverability was coming down, their reputation was coming down. So we got them on a dedicated IP address that allowed them to control their own reputation in the email deliverability world, which was really important as a first step and foundational step for this client. While we were doing that, they were working on their data cleanup side of things. So how do we really get to that 360-degree view? And how do we ensure when we're getting online donations on a daily basis that we're matching people as closely as possible with the people already in our CRM so that we're not sending somebody a new donor welcome series when they've been a donor for some time, but they just happen to create a duplicate in the system. So we did a lot of foundational work around that data. processes for managing duplicates, identifying ways to match duplicates more effectively to try and reduce those costs, leveraging new tools in the ecosystem to manage those duplicates. And then you can see what happened is very quickly we were able to turn things around and increase online giving by 3 times the number, both in terms of revenue and the number of donors. We used a series, a journey to encourage people to become sustaining donors, increase that by 20%. And you can see we had a massive increase in email subscribers over the 2 years. I think one of my favorite results, though, is that when we really had the clean data and we implemented the deeper segmentation, what happened was Hillel was able to send half as many emails in the first 6 months of their fiscal year because they were much more targeted, but they raised twice the money that they had raised in the entire year previous to that. So that's the real power of marketing automation. Send fewer emails in a much more personalized and targeted way so that people are responding to them because they're, those emails are meaningful to those constituents. And so you get a higher response rate. And overall, people are more satisfied. You can go to the next slide, Jett. I think you've got the sense already from Andy that they have already had some lessons learned through this process. I'm going to let you talk about those, Andy.
Sure. So yes, the first one there, we selected Marketing Cloud at the same time as we were selecting our CRM, and it was a matter of suddenly having something semi-concrete in terms of aspiration and really wanting to get there as fast as possible. So we did select Marketing Cloud at the same time as our CRM, and part of that was the second point there, the whiz-bang features. When some of our marketing team saw Journey Builder in Marketing Cloud, that's one of the studios in Marketing Cloud, they were just blown away. And that really helped tip the selection of the CRM toward Salesforce versus, say, the Microsoft platform Dynamics that we were looking at. That was really important. I mean, it started to help gel our organization's aspiration toward moving toward full marketing automation, and I don't regret. I don't think any of us in the organization regret that, because that's an important learning along the way. But I would say, if you're starting down this road, just beware of those whiz-bang features and think about, this is something that we want to be able to do in the future. We don't need to necessarily buy into it yet. In our case, a lot happened in those 3 years between selecting our CRM, consolidating our business processes, rolling out the CRM, and of course, COVID-19. So acquire your tool when you're ready. The fourth bullet there about investing up front. I wish now we had spent a little bit more time on the guiding principles that we had for our project, and that we had expanded them a little bit at that time to look more like the ones I showed you a few minutes ago on that slide, because it would have helped consolidate organization-wide understanding of what we're trying to achieve. When you're ready to start moving toward marketing automation, I would say think about the approach you want to take in selecting it. Don't just say, there are these 3 choices. What are the feature lists? Let's pick one. Really put a framework into place, something like what we had, that we've recently put together. And then the last point there about leveraging the tools you have to help change culture. If you have Salesforce with NPSP, or another platform that has something like engagement plans, which is it's an NPSP feature, use them, because it will help start your organization thinking along the lines of marketing automation. Compared to Marketing Cloud, it's a rudimentary tool, but it gets the concept in place, and it gets people thinking about the idea of a journey, even if you're not using that particular word. So I think we could go to the next slide. Yeah, so I think I've covered a lot of this. Our organization has changed a lot in the last well, 6 months. We've downsized by a third. That was a very painful process in a very short time, and our budget has dropped by about 40%. And we're actually planning at this point to stay at that budget level for a while. We decided to take a fairly conservative approach and not assume that our revenue is going to rebound to where it was in February. So our next steps, we're going to evaluate our options for marketing automation now against those principles that I showed you. Even though we had already invested in Marketing Cloud, it's possible that it may not be the right tool for us at this point, and we would rather pause now and evaluate everything really fully before buying in. I have a feeling we're going to stick with Marketing Cloud because it does have some amazing whiz-bang features. And it does tick off a lot of our other requirements on that grid. So we're going to gain buy-in on those guiding principles and help them with the selection. And we're just now at a point where we're revisiting that aspirational vision that started to develop 3 years ago and looking for really concrete examples, something along the lines of what Cathy just mentioned with Hillel. To really make it, to flesh it out, make it a little bit more concrete, to make some metaphors.
So this is just really a summary slide, captures a lot of what we've talked about and a few new things. For a while, when you were looking at an email marketing tool, there were a lot of options for nonprofits where you could jump on a system and they would give you 30 days free and you could just try that, pilot that with a particular group of audiences. Really, that approach isn't as effective with a marketing automation tool. Really, the investment that you need to get to the point where you can leverage a marketing automation tool doesn't lend itself to a pilot and then assess and then move to the entire organization. It's not as useful in a case like this. Again, with that pilot, it's really hard to get to the scale because usually there's some caps on the numbers of contacts or subscribers you can use in those platforms. Really thinking about the resourcing that you need to execute on the strategy. We really encourage our clients to think about their marketing strategy as part of their solution evaluation, and as part of that to understand what types of resources they have available to actually execute on that aspirational vision that Andy mentioned. Buy-in is still really important. Some of those organizational readiness factors that we talked about, and then really understanding the total cost of ownership. It's really easy for a vendor to put in front of you, here's the software cost. But the software cost is really the tip of the iceberg. There's often a cost by subscriber. There may be a cost by user. There are staffing costs tied to this. There are data hygiene costs tied to all of this. And so really starting to understand your total cost of ownership of making this type of transition is important. And as I said earlier, people who are more effective in this solution start with a strategy. And so it's really important to evaluate everything properly and have that vision and that plan that we talked about. So that brings us to the last slide, which is really these demos, these solution demos want us to, they get us so excited about things that we want to go to run. We look at that Hillel example. You look at some of the other examples that I've worked with some of our clients, and you can find some of those case studies on our website. And you want to get to that finish line quickly. But what we find is that without the foundation of the plan, the walk, the jog, the run model, it's really hard to get there. So Andy, where would you say you guys are on that model right now?
Well, we're off the screen to the left. We're just at a point now where we're really wanting to figure out what run looks like. And just in the last week, we've had a fantastic meeting with Salesforce, where they were giving us their vision of what run might look like. And I think once we have that, once we have internal buy-in on what run looks like, we'll step back and agree on jog and walk. But one of the things that we've already agreed internally is that all three of those pieces need to be agreed by the whole organization before we begin. So we don't want to say, okay, this is run, and then we'll just sort of decide later what walk and jog look like. We want everyone to understand these are the steps, and this is what's required to begin with walk, and what we'll be doing while walk is happening to get ready for jog and so forth. It's again really easy, I think, or it would be for us anyway, to get so swept up in that aspirational vision around run and say, yeah, we'll figure out what walk and jog look like. And I think that in our organization anyway, that would be a recipe for disaster.
Well, it's interesting because that's actually one of the most common reasons that I've seen us get clients. Clients will come to us and say, we bought this tool 3 or 4 years ago, we're not using it. Can you help us leverage this tool more effectively? So I don't think you're alone there. I think you're taking the right steps. And I think the other point that you hit on that really resonated with me this morning is the whole organization. A lot of times we see marketing departments or technology departments wanting to lead this, but if you really don't have that buy-in from those organizations, from those departments or other areas within your organization, it's really hard to get to that point of consolidated data, but they're also the people who are going to be providing you with that content that is going to resonate with people. So you really need that organization-wide partnership. So,
hey, Catherine, Andy, and Jett, this is a great conversation, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I see that we have only 3 more minutes left. And I wanted to just call out, I don't know that we have too much time for questions, but because we have a lot of people from other functions on the call, I wanted to get a quick show of hands of, is this something the group would like to discuss further? And if we should have follow-on conversations around this topic. And also if there are questions, like there are a few questions on the chat. I don't know what's the best way. If y'all want to maybe email us your answers. I don't know if maybe you can take a couple very quickly.
Sure. I noticed there's a couple of questions about account-based marketing and B2B marketing. I think those are some great questions. Account-based marketing is becoming much more significant. I think even charities that work in a typical B2C or business to constituent model are moving into the world of B2B because of corporate sponsorship and the importance of corporate donors. And that takes you into some of the really neat features of marketing automation, including lead identification and nurturing. If account-based marketing is a critical part of the work that you do, that's really important to understand from an assessment perspective, because different tools do that more efficiently than other tools. So really important to understand those requirements carefully as you're evaluating solutions. And Jett, I think we can take some of the questions and send a follow-up email.
Yeah, I'll be sharing the slide deck with the folks at NetHope to distribute, and I can also prepare some responses, work with both Andy and Cathy to prepare responses to the questions and distribute that at the same time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jett, Andrew, and Catherine. This was a really very informative presentation, and thank you for all the examples. Andy, all the best in the journey at CCS.
Thank you.
Just real quick with a show of hands before people start hopping off, is this a topic that folks would like to continue further discussions on? I see one hand raised from Mira. If you can use the hand raise feature on Zoom or chat in what your interest is, if that's easier on the Zoom chat. Okay, I'm seeing a few more hand raises. We're also preparing, as you know, for the upcoming NetHope Summit in October, and we're figuring out the plans for the next year. So this is always very useful information for this working group. And I think we have touch points on the data and application side to so many parts of the organizations we work with. So this was an area that I was especially curious to explore. So yeah, looks like a lot of people do have an interest in continuing discussions on marketing automation and marketing platforms. All right, I think with that we are at time. So again, a big thanks to all of you, Jett, Andrew, and Cathy. This was a very informative presentation. Appreciate it very much. And thanks everyone for joining and for your engagement and questions. More to come. Let's continue
Thank you
the
so
dialogue.
much.
All right.